Welcome to Alberta Conservation Association's Harvest Your Own podcast, the resource for everything hunting, navigating through the field, the butcher shop, and the kitchen. Life is all about great food. Let's get started.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Brad Fenson, an avid outdoor enthusiast who has worked as a freelance journalist, photographer, and public speaker for over 3 decades. I have hunted, fished, and foraged all my life and hope to share my passion for the outdoors. Along the way, I want to encourage everyone to harvest wild proteins and enjoy the satisfaction of providing the next meal for your family. Our goal is to educate, entertain, and inspire individuals to get outdoors and create a connection between food, health, and your future meals. Welcome to Harvest Your Own. Today we have a visitor that was with us once before, speaking on some interesting outdoor facts with dogs and birds and good things like that. Vince Yellow from Calgary. And I was going to introduce you, but you wear so many different hats. Why don't we just take a moment to get to know Vince a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I'm an old gearhead from way back. And so I'm with CycleWorks Motorsports in Calgary. This is going into our 21st year. But like you said, I wear a lot of different hats. I'm the president of the Calgary Pointing Dog Club. I've got a couple of bird dogs, and that's my passion, is to compete with them and hunt in the fall and try and find new areas in the beautiful Alberta prairie. I'm also sitting on the ACA board of directors, which I enjoy thoroughly, and lots of different venues and items and things that we do to kind of keep busy.
Yes, I've had the pleasure of hunting, I'll say beside you and over your dogs, and they do work very well, but that's because you spend so much time with them.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we try and do an all-year type of scenario. So literally, we've been training really hard for the last 3 weeks, and we're in the beginning of March here, and our field trials start up in 2 weeks, which is great. So we go pretty hard all of April and May and June, and then we get a bit of a break in the summer. But by the time we get into September, the dogs are ready to go. You know, I always find it interesting. The dogs are certainly a member of our family, and some hunting dogs, it's difficult because September 1, you turn them loose and you expect them to be athletes after doing nothing all summer long. So we really try and keep in good shape, the dogs and myself.
Well, I was going to say, I always get reminded the first time I go on a 12K hike on opening day and forget that the next morning your legs are going to remind you that you hadn't done it in a while.
Exactly.
You know, you also said you're a gearhead, and that's an important part of this. We're going to talk about all-terrain vehicles, off-highway vehicles, you know, those wonderful things that can entertain us, recreate, be your workhorse, do lots of different things. I've never been a real speed hound because I've always used them in terrain that's rough or lots of trees, and you know it's just not the place for speed. But let's talk about the changes over the years. I started with a Big Red, which is a death trap nowadays.
Oh my gosh, you're so right, Pat. And I can remember as well, back in the early day, we would go hunting up north for moose, and a couple of our friends had those 3-wheelers, and they were difficult to keep upright for sure. And today we've got side-by-sides that have heat and air conditioning and stereo systems, and my gosh, they're almost the price of a new pickup truck. It's crazy.
Yeah, but we've still got quads and the side-by-sides. We got 6-wheelers. The whole industry has evolved like everything else. You look at computers, televisions, phones, whatever. There's not only a marketing cycle, but a research and development cycle that takes things to new heights. Like, just look at the tires on ATVs compared to what they used to be.
Yeah, and that's a really great point. I mean, the technology is always taking us further. The other thing that people forget sometimes is, depending on the jurisdiction that you live, in Alberta, we're very, very, very fortunate because we've got a lot of country, a lot of crown land that we can access. But in some areas, you have to take your vehicle out to a designated park, and they have special mud areas, and it's really fun sport. So you can buy vehicles with great big mud tires, and think they're called high lifters, and but those vehicles are also available here, and we have to be careful when we're taking them into the public backcountry.
Yeah, I mentioned that because just the tires alone can make a big difference in terms of what I'll call your footprint on the landscape when you're there. And of course, we all have different ethics. Our outdoor ethics are personal. Our ethics are individuals, and one person's ethics aren't necessarily the next. So when it comes to using ATVs, where people don't have the same ethics, we have rules and regulations to sort of keep things in check.
Yeah, exactly. And you've hit the nail right on the head, Brad. And a lot of times we have a lot of new riders, and they don't know where to go or who to ride with or what the rules and regulations are. And certainly over time you develop those ethics. And if you're a backcountry person, maybe a hunter or fisherman, those are kind of ingrained within you. But if you're new to the industry, those are things that you rely on other people to help teach you. Certainly we find that there's three types of riders, really. There's a recreational rider that's going out just for fun in a lot of the areas. And in Alberta, we're very fortunate. In McLean Creek and Ghost, we've got some public land use areas or PLUS that you can go in and ride, and there's regulations in there. And then you've got your hunter, your fisherman, where you can use it in the backcountry to access some lakes or ponds or rivers, or maybe to drag out that great elk that you shot in Crown Land. And then we've got the commercial stuff, the farmers and the ranchers, and we always see those machines being used in those aspects as well. So you kind of define once you have an off-road vehicle, where you fit in that.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because when I'm looking at ATVs, if I want to know more about them, I go to my farmer friends, because they use them every day. They use them for light use, but they also use them for like the hardest uses, and where they put them to the test and know what they do. They're doing their own maintenance and their own repairs and stuff. They know their machines in and out like they do their tractors and everything else, or their cattle or whatever it is. So, there's a difference in us. A lot of us are recreational users, hunters and anglers. It's either seasonal use or, there's times when we can get out there to actually use them. But, that's talks to the diversity of machines we have as well.
Yeah, you bet. There's a lot of crossover. There's no doubt that the farmers and ranchers, they're the original gearheads, so they know exactly what's going on for sure. And you're right. Some folks, literally, some of my best friends, they own ATVs, and they literally use them for 2 weeks a year, the first 2 weeks in November, and then they're parked all season long. Yeah. And sometimes once in a while we'll get out and do some riding in the summer just for fun. So there's certainly a lot of crossover as well.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because as a gearhead and involved with cycle work, what I have found, I've had friends that have ATVs and they do exactly that. They use them for 1 month and park them and come back the next year, and they have carburetor problems because of the additives we put in our gas. You can't let it just sit. And those machines are meant to be used, or you got to put stabilizers in your gas and stuff. So, if you have one, and it's a huge investment, as you said, find ways to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is one of the biggest things that we see either in the spring or come November 1st in hunting season. And it's no different than our lawnmowers. If you throw them in the garage in the winter and then try and fire it up in the spring, the fuel's gone bad and it turns green, and the ATVs are really no different. So putting some fuel additives in at the end of the season certainly helps. The other thing is, too, we talked earlier about advancements. I don't think you can even buy an ATV with a carburetor anymore. Thank goodness. They're all fuel injected, which makes a big difference in terms of reliability and drivability for sure.
Right. Yeah. We talked about tires, and I'll bring up this point. We can have the majority of people, like we do in most cases, like hunters, that are responsible, but it only takes one person to make everyone look bad.
Yeah, that's exactly right. At the end of the day, I think when you're riding in the backcountry, especially in public lands, you have to look for sustainable trails. And what we mean by that is hard packed trails and rocks, and try and avoid the riparian areas and creeks. If you do ride through a wet area that doesn't have a designated trail, those marks can literally stay for years. And certainly the more aggressive the tire, the deeper the ruts that we build, which makes it more difficult, even on a sustainable trail, for the next user to come through. So those are very important things to think about.
Absolutely. I've hunted bears in northern Alberta for many years, and with people that have to cross some muskegs. And you can see where somebody went through and just gunned it and spun their tires, and they eat holes in the muskeg to the point where you can't pass through. And then you see trails coming and braided off of it to create a new trail and a new trail. Although I have had people stop us and say, were you the one that went through the muskegs? Do you know what to do? As soon as your machine bogs down, get out and run your winch and just putt through it, pull it through, get to the other side, don't disturb the vegetation, and it all bounces back up. Pretty good advice.
Absolutely. And there is some skill to that for sure. I think a lot of people don't realize that in the backcountry in Alberta, we're very, very fortunate. It's actually a privilege to ride in the backcountry, and it's not a right. And so if you keep that in the back of your mind and think about, trying to keep on a sustainable trail, and you mentioned braiding, that's really important, Brad. So a lot of people ask me, Vince, if I come across a log, should I try and jump over it or should I go around it? Well, if it's accessible and you think you can jump over it, you should try, because braiding a trail only makes the trails wider, and it creates different areas for water to run off, and it can actually damage those areas. So that's important to think of.
You know, you're involved with lots of different, I'll call them ATV clubs, different recreational users. That's kind of a golden rule. One of the golden rules, is it not?
Yes, absolutely. The golden rules really is you want to stay on designated trails. And the reason they're designated is because they've a lot of the clubs have gone in and they've looked at these trails and ways to get around those riparian areas and those creeks. A lot of these clubs will create ups and overs or bridges, so that's really important. The other thing is you want to leave no trace when you go into the backcountry. Whether you're on an ATV or whether you're hiking or hunting, you want to pack out everything that you've brought with you, but certainly you want to minimize soil erosion when you're on an ATV. So going back to our tire discussion, do you really need that super aggressive tire with a 3-inch or 4-inch paddle that might be more, suited to snow as opposed to mud? So that's really important. The other thing is waterway protection. We need to make sure that we're going across solid crossings. We're looking for gravel beds to quickly get across those trails. And if you're riding in one of the plazas that is regulated by the government, the trails are designated. So you want to make sure you use those trail crossings. Back in the day, I can remember, and it's funny when you're younger, you do the dumbest things, but you'd be hunting way up north and your trail was all muddy, and I'd see a guy running down the middle of the river to try and clean off his quad. And that isn't really sustainable use. You want to just take it home and worry about it later, and don't use those quads for that. The other thing is, if you're pleasure riding, you want to respect wildlife. You're going to encounter all types of animals, moose, caribou, deer, depending where you're at, and bears, right? So you want to make sure you have your bear spray with you, but certainly slow down. If you can't avoid the animal, turn around and go back and find another way around. As well as when we're in the backcountry, a lot of times those trails might come across some designated lease land, so there might be some fences and gates. So if you do encounter that on a trail, you want to always leave the gate the way you found it, whether it's open or closed, and that's super important because you don't know if someone's got some cattle or the livelihood on the other side of that fence. You want to respect that.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. I've run across the programs in some of the states when I'm out hunting where they have red tags and green tags, and they say right on them, leave this gate open, don't open this gate, or whatever it is. Yeah. But it's interesting. But the rule in Alberta is leave it the way you found it, because you don't know what's in there. Leaving gates closed is important to landowners and leaseholders because of the temperature changes. Those wire fences that run half mile at a time can stretch, and next time you go, you can't open the gate or it won't stay closed depending on what the wire did. So, we have to look at it from everyone's point of view, not just our own, and there's a lot of money invested in those. So, just using common sense goes a long ways.
This podcast is produced for Harvest Your Own, a program dedicated to those who want to reconnect with food and health through their experiences outdoors. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a resource for individuals to learn more about hunting and the outdoors. There's information to get you started and ensure that your compass stays pointed in the right direction to be successful. Where's your next meal coming from?
And certainly, we're coming out of the end of March here. Apparently, the weather's going to warm up to plus teens next week. So we're definitely in that transition season. So that's an important thing to know, too. If you're going out riding in the early spring, you're going to leave trails because everything's going to be wet and muddy. And so that might be different than riding in the summertime where everything's hot and dry. So sometimes, your tire choice or even your trail choice for your ride that day is gonna vary depending on the conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. Historically, I've been an avid moose and elk hunter, so a lot of times I'm on old logging roads. Sometimes they've been put to bed, or there's some access control at the beginning of them that you can get in, but sometimes we shoot a moose way back, 20 kilometers in, and you might have to create a trail. But if we do, I don't want people to know where I moose hunt, so I make the trail invisible, basically. Get in and out real quiet. And recently I found a great invention, a capstan winch. And I used it on an elk that I shot this year, and you can pull elk through a deadfall or across a clear cut, across a river or up a hill or up a steep river valley, any of that. It'll just pull them just about the speed that you walk. Right. So, you got a quad, you get as close as you can. Then get creative. In the old days, I used to cut them up, quarter them, pack them back to the quad, and that's probably why I have back problems today. And appreciate an ATV even more. But, things like a capstan winch or a couple buddies to help you work on it leaves no trace, doesn't disturb the wildlife further, and doesn't give up your hunting spot.
Yeah, exactly. And to your point as well, if you need to break a trail or go off of the main trail, not creating a linear line and just turning and cutting is really great too, because those straight linear disturbances is what we want to try and avoid.
Yeah,
and that's a really good point.
Yeah. So, we talked about these different things. You referred to a PLUS, which is a public land use zone. And the only reason you'd know that acronym is if you were familiar with the legal and local regulations within our province. I mean, it's really important. Again, the onus is on the owner and the rider. So you need to look into this before you head off.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, most of that work is done before you ever load your quad onto your truck or your trailer. So you need to know where you're going to ride, and you need to know the local regulations in terms of what the land use is and what trails are available for you to use and not use. But even before that, if you're on public land in Alberta, you are required to be registered and insured. And I believe there's a minimum you have to carry of $1 million liability insurance. So you want to make sure you have that in place. The other thing is when we're hunting and you're way back in the backcountry, nobody wants to wear a helmet, but it is the law.
It is. And
there's a reason for it. You need to protect your head. When you're riding on a quad, there's a lot of stuff, especially if you're way in the backcountry, that's hidden. So, for example, you could have a stump or a log or a rock that's hidden under grass, and even at slow speed, if you hit that, it could flip you over. And so you need to be able to make sure that you protect yourself so you don't get injured. And ATVs, just the nature of the fact, they're going to put you further back into the backcountry that you're going to go with on your feet by walking. So you want to make sure you wear a helmet. You want to make sure you have some safety gear. You want to make sure if you leave the trailer, it's a beautiful sunny day, that you've got some rain gear. And just in case you get stuck or get injured or wounded and you're by yourself or with a partner, you want to make sure that you have the ability to stay overnight. No different than when you're packing your rifle into the backcountry, just to be prepared.
It's a nice thing about the new ATVs. You have room for all that stuff. And
yes.
The horsepower to carry it.
Yep.
They've got gear bags and saddles and different boxes that you can get to make sure you have a first aid kit and a survival kit and your axe and ropes and come-alongs and pulleys and anything you need to get out of a situation when you're stuck, to get game out of the bush, to use it to create a shelter. There's everything can be right there at your fingertips as you need it.
Yeah, and some rope and some pulleys can make a big difference. If you manage to harvest an animal and you're off the trail, rather than trying to, cut your way, and as you mentioned earlier about your winch, you can use a rope and some pulleys and pull that game with your quad onto the main trail. And then once you're there, Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but I've been stuck in a few places where I needed to use ropes and pulleys besides the winch just to ease my way out of a situation where it would have been an extended camping trip.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, it's good to know all these things. The public land use zones, do you have a little more information on those?
Well, yeah, definitely. Certainly at the dealership, we see a lot of brand new riders. And the question is, well, Vince, where can I go and where can I ride? And so we're lucky enough through all Alberta. I hail from Calgary, so there's some fantastic clubs. We've got the Calgary ATV Riders, which is a 4-wheel off-road club. And we've got the Rocky Mountain Dirt Riders, which is a 2-wheel club. And each of those types of machines actually have different trails. So in those designated areas, some trails are designated for pickup trucks only, or pickup trucks and smaller. Some of the trails are designated for ATVs, and some are single track, which would be like a dirt bike. And so it's important to know the difference between those trails. And a lot of these clubs have the maps of those certain plazas. So what I refer to being in southern Alberta, there's 2 off-road recreational areas, one being McLean Creek and the other one being the Ghost region north of the Ghost Dam on the Bow River. And so there's designated trails in there, and they take you into the backcountry. Some of them have loops. Some of them are dead ends, which we need to respect. You can go to the end of the trail. There's usually a lake or a fabulous view, but you need to come back on the same trail as opposed to trying cutting a new trail. And the reason that these trails have been created is because they're sustainable. They're on hard rock. They're trying to stay out of water, and they're trying to stay out of riparian areas. And so we need to try and maintain that. Not only that, it's illegal to go off of those trails. So you don't want to necessarily get caught. So in the spring and the summertime, they're recreational trails, but in the fall, we've got lots of hunters and fishermen that use them too, which is fantastic.
I've seen that in the prairie too, whether it's on private land or some lease land, special areas. Some of the trails, you want to get back to where some antelope are or mule deer and use an ATV. There are some routes that you have to stay on. The EID is another perfect example. Yes. They have routes and you're not supposed to take motor vehicles off them. So they're a great tool to get you off the beaten trail, get you a little further back than the average person's going to walk, put you in country where maybe no one else has gone to look for a big critter. But the rules are rules. And down there, people can see with a spotting scope from 5 miles away. So you better pay attention.
Yes, exactly. You never know who's watching. And that's a great point because I spend a lot of time down there. So you've got a designated trail and there's lots of little offshoots and you're like, well, someone's gone down there. Well, it might be a trail for an oil company to hit a well, or it might be a trail that a rancher or a farmer uses on their leases to get cattle out. And so those aren't really designed for us. So fortunately today, whether it's with your phones or our trucks nowadays, we can load our iHunter maps on there. So there really is no excuse to know where you're at and know what the rules are for those particular areas.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to go back to your rule about helmets. It's not the same if you have a larger unit with a roll bar. Is that correct?
You know what? That is a very common misconception, Brad.
Oh.
So if you're in a vehicle, it's an off-road vehicle, whether it's a Ranger or pick a manufacturer, a Kawasaki or a Bombardier. And I'll explain why. So the very first year I took a side-by-side up north, I didn't have my seatbelt on, or I didn't think I needed a helmet because I was in a cabbed unit. And I was driving down a cut line, and lo and behold, I hit a rock, and I bumped up so fast and hit my head so hard on the roll cage that I quickly went back to camp and put my helmet on. And so for those reasons, because you're in a vehicle with a roll cage, you're still in rough terrain, so you can bang the side of your head or the top of your head, so you are required to wear a helmet in those vehicles as well. You might not need a full face helmet like you would on a dirt bike, but at the very, very least you need a half helmet, and that's just to protect you from the side impacts and the top impacts when you're driving through rough terrain.
Interesting. That's the voice of experience. It makes a big difference. Yes. That's why we're doing this, right? We're sharing a message because there's lots of misconceptions in Alberta. And there's different rules, regionally, different habitat types. We talk about staying out of the streams. Well, sometimes it can be illegal to disturb fish habitat. And all of us have a heart, a soft spot for fisheries. So we want to make sure we don't do anything to cause problems there. But that brings us right back to getting involved in these clubs. If you're not sure about rules, there's a great way to have, I call it to shorten the learning curve.
Absolutely. These clubs have guided rides all the time in the summertime and in the fall. And so you'll meet at a loading area and they'll take you for a ride, and they'll show you what a sustainable trail is and where the crossings are on the water crossings are in the rivers and creeks. And so exactly like you said, you can learn a lot quicker. And not only that, you can get into some more fabulous areas when you're with someone that has some experience, no different than going hunting or fishing for your first time with a mentor.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, I think people are familiar with different fishing clubs and Trout Unlimited, and there's the Fish and Game associations and clubs. There's 110 clubs in the province. Is there a provincial group that looks at ATV use and clubs and riding and all the rest of it?
Yes, absolutely, Brad. So the body that governs that is the AOHVA, or the Alberta Off-Highway Vehicle Association. A bit of a tongue twister there. And so a lot of the local clubs will fall under their umbrella. So the AOHVA works with the government of Alberta to look at the different riding areas and these plazas and determine what are sustainable trails. And the clubs themselves work underneath them. And because they're the stewards of their local areas, whether you're talking about the Southern Calgary Club or the Rocky Mountain House Club or all the little towns in between. And those particular club members are the stewards of the backcountry. So they're out there every weekend. If we've got a big windstorm and there's a blowdown, they're out cutting down trees so that we can continue to work on these trails. They're applying for government grants to build bridges across those waterways because our fisheries are really important. And a lot of those high mountain streams and the foothills, contain bull trout, and we want to protect that environment. We're trying to bring our native trout species back. So those are really, really important initiatives for those clubs, and it's important to to join a club and be counted. Because when we look at the province and what we're doing and how many people are out there using the resource, that's an important thing to be counted and to be known.
Right, and I've always said that for whether you're a pheasant hunter or a big game hunter or an angler, there's groups out there that you should get involved with, because it means more awareness for conservation education, but it's also a great way to get to know people with similar interests and create new friends and circles of influence, we'll call it.
Exactly. And you hit the key word, that word education. A lot of times new people don't know what's right and what's wrong. And so it's important to get involved in these clubs. The AHVA has something like 160,000 members in Alberta. So that's a lot of people riding in the backcountry. And there's always the one or two people that kind of wreck it for the rest of us. So when we're out there, we have to keep our eyes open. If you see something that doesn't look right, we've got provincial resources for that. You can call 310-LAND, or you can call Report a Poacher, and they can look into those types of events. You don't necessarily want to get involved yourself in today's day and age, but if you can take it, film it, record it, then we can get out and talk to those people and educate them. So next time out, they're not doing those things that we consider.
Yeah, that was the next thing I was going to ask you. Like, we have to be the stewards as well. You can't just look at it and say, man, I wish those guys wouldn't do that. It gives us all a black eye. You actually have to step up and do something. We're not enforcement officers or agents, so you shouldn't get involved in terms of finger wagging them or tongue lashing them, because it's going to lead to confrontation. But everyone has a cell phone in their pocket. Take pictures. Even when you're running a trail and you come to something that's going to not look right, or you know that it's wrong, take a picture, so that, for one thing, that you're not accused of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, it is stewardship, Brad. You're right. Whether we're hunting or fishing or riding, when we're in the backcountry, we need to be our own stewards, because we're the ones that are out there on the landscape. There can't be a Fish and Wildlife officer at every corner, but certainly we can use our eyes and our ears to help educate people.
This podcast was made possible by Alberta Conservation Association and the Harvest Your Own community. If you're interested in harvesting your own food, there's a comprehensive collection of information to gain insight and knowledge. Head to the field, harvest your own protein, prepare it, and taste the results. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a library of information, from getting started and geared up to processing, butchering, and cooking wild game, to make the connection between health and food.
One other thing I noticed, I travel lots, hunt and fish all over North America. I've seen in some jurisdictions there's actually programs that are called Tread Lightly or Leave No Trace, a number of different programs. Do we have anything in Alberta, or is that done through the clubs? What is out there to help notify people that maybe don't listen to podcasts, read regulations, join clubs, or know the first thing about rules, regulation, or ethics about using their off-highway vehicles or ATVs?
There's not really a provincial mantra when it comes to those types of things. It's certainly at the club level. And it's just one of the golden rules. It's ride hard and tread lightly. And so there's many different aspects of that, a lot of them that we've discussed today. And a lot of it just really boils down to common sense. If you're going into an area and you look across something that doesn't quite look right, just turn back. In the spring, you could ride a trail that in the fall was just fine. But as you ride through an area, if you're leaving tracks, maybe think to go back. And that's another mantra that they look at. The more ruts you make, the next person that comes around goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And then pretty soon we have a trail that is unsustainable to use and maybe running water into an area that we don't want it to go. And before you know it, we've got that trail closed down.
Right. And then everybody loses.
Yeah.
So, we're not being holier than thou here. We're actually saying things to protect everyone's rights and ability to use the backcountry, public lands, unique areas, wilderness, things where we get recreation enjoyment to hunt, fish, go berry picking, bird watching, whatever whatever floats your boat type of thing. And I'll say it again, because I said it early in the podcast, is it only takes a couple bad apples to make everyone look bad and to spoil the cart. It really can be just one or two individuals that make everyone, give everyone a tarnish.
You're absolutely right, Brad. And so again, we're so fortunate in Alberta to have so many areas that we have public access to. But like as we said earlier, you need to know where you are and where you plan to go. A lot of these areas are foot access only. So it only takes this one person to go in there with an off-road vehicle, and pretty soon that's shut down to all users. So that's super important.
Yeah. You've been in the industry a long time. This is a passion of yours. It's not hard to tell that. Any other rules, regulations that are easy to overlook, like when you're transporting an ATV, for instance? Does it have to be fastened down by a certain number of points, or can you put one strap on it and head out?
Brad, that is a really great point. I've seen ATVs on a trailer with one strap over the seat, and someone will just call it good. Unfortunately, it's just common. It's down to common sense again. So ourselves, whenever we're transporting a vehicle, an ATV or side by side, the bigger the unit, the bigger the strap you need. A dirt bike can have just a little pull type strap. If you're familiar with those, they just have a slider on them and a button that you push to loosen them off. And they're good to a vehicle for about 250 to 400 pounds. Anything more than that, which is every ATV in the market right now, you need a ratchet strap. And if a ratchet strap ever breaks, you need a backup. So what does that mean? I have two in the front and two in the back. So if one breaks or loosens off, you've got another one there to hold you. And so that's a really good rule of thumb, is to always have two straps in the front and two in the back. So 4 per vehicle.
I don't know if this is the correct way to do it, but because they have great shock absorbers in them, you can run into problems. You tighten a strap and you hit a bump in the road, and the shocks go down. The rope or your fastening device falls right off. So how tight do you fasten them down? Do you put pressure on those shocks? Does it hurt them at all?
That is a great question. And you're right. If you ever had a hidden camera in a trailer that you're going down the highway with, you would be amazed at how much that vehicle goes up and down. It goes up and down the road as you do. When you feel a big bump and your truck goes up and down, that's exactly what that quad's doing inside the trailer. So when you tighten them down, you want to tighten them down to about the maximum would be about 50% of the travel to shock, to leave a little bit of travel beyond that. There's actually other devices that work super well. I've seen these really neat nets that go over top of the tires, and you tie individual tire down, and it actually leaves the suspension 100% free at that point to go up and down. But I've also seen some guys use that method with a really short trailer, and when they get to where they're going, they wonder why their roof is all dented because the vehicle's bouncing back and forth and hitting the top of their trailer. So yeah, there's a little bit of common sense that's involved with that.
Yeah, I've never used an enclosed trailer to haul mine around. We have open trailers, which,
right.
There's have their own pluses and minuses. But I always use my winch cable too, because it's sort of like the last connection if something did go haywire for some reason.
That is a great point as well. And a lot of people do that. They'll use the winch tied on the front and use 2 straps in the back. But the reality of that is, when you look at your winch, there's many, many wraps around the main spool. So if you use your winch to tie it down and you're going down the highway, that winch cable is pulling and jerking for 200-300, however far you're traveling on that spool, and it can actually tighten it to a point where you might not be able to unravel it later. So I would recommend not using the winch, using 2 straps in the front. But if you wanted to use the winch as a safety, that's a great idea. I would hook it up, but just kind of leave it loose, so if a strap breaks, it's there as a backup.
Right, which is what I do. I never put tension, like strong tension on it. It is like the last insurance policy if something did go wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those winch cables will break. It's amazing.
Oh, yeah, we've had it doing break, just hauling out moose and stuff. You put enough pressure on it or hit the right situation, you find out just how strong that cable is.
Yeah, and especially if it gets a nick in it that you're not aware of it. And nowadays, you're actually seeing a lot more nylon cables as opposed to those stainless steel cables. And there's a couple advantages to that. If you've ever had to reel back in 50 feet of cable through your hands in leather gloves, it's much easier than nylon rope than on that stainless steel braided rope that's got a nick in it for sure.
And anyone that's been poked by one of those broken braids won't forget it, because they burn and sting for hours.
For quite a while. Yeah, it's like a paper cut times 10.
Yeah, actually. Any more words of advice or tips and tricks? Because, I think we've talked about a few things that people are going to go, wow, I've been doing it wrong. I have to reassess how I'm looking at that.
Well, I think one of the biggest things, especially in the last 10 years, we can get huge weather swings in Alberta where it gets super dry and hot. So we could be out, on one weekend, it's a real fun, muddy ride. And then we've got a couple of weeks of 30-degree weather, and then all of a sudden we've got a fire risk. So number one, we've got to make sure that we check to see what the fire situation is in the area that we're riding. And if there is a fire risk, or even if there isn't, if you're riding in dry weather, it behooves you, when riding through grassy areas, once you come out of those areas, to stop, take a break, have a sandwich. If you're a smoker, have a cigarette. Just be careful you don't put it out there. But you need to pull that grass out of the ATV, because if it gets hot or if it gets too close to the exhaust, those becomes areas that you can ignite that grass and create a forest fire. And trust me, you don't want to be the guy that's responsible for putting a fire out, getting a fire started.
Or getting stuck behind it somewhere.
Exactly, especially when your limited egress your egress is limited coming out of those areas, right?
Right.
So that's one of the biggest things that we see. Not only does it wreck components when you have grass and weeds wrapped around your axles, but that stuff can get hot and it can catch on fire. So it's important to stop, have a knife with you, cut it off, and pull it off as much as you can when you're riding in the backcountry and in dry areas. As well, if there is a fire risk and you're stopping for lunch or to go fishing, you need to plan where you park. You don't want to park in tall grass. You want to make sure that you park on a trail or on some rock, and make sure that your exhaust stays out of those areas. As well, you need to ensure that your muffler has a spark arrestor. Now, from the factory, most 99.9% of the vehicles have a spark arrestor, but a lot of times they can fall, they can break out. Or some folks, don't ask me why, they like a loud sounding machine, so they'll get an aftermarket exhaust, which might be great for the racetrack, but not so great in the backcountry, because you could literally be firing sparks out the back of that thing, hence the name spark arrestor.
Right. You know, it's interesting you bring that up, because I hunted on the prairies at a very special draw a few years ago and got permission from a bunch of private landowners, and we could access certain fence lines and stuff with machines, but the requirement was that we carried a fire extinguisher and a fire rake. And you know, to carry an extinguisher and a rake to go on a once-in-a-lifetime hunt that you wait 20 years for a draw, or even one that you only wait 5 or 10 years for, is pretty interesting. Not a big investment. Something that you can take with you again in the future when you ride in other places, anytime there's dry conditions. Yeah,
exactly, 100%. And a fire extinguisher is so easy to bring with you, for sure. And it just all boils down to that it's a privilege to be out there. And as long as you keep that in the back of your mind, I find the people that really take that to heart are the ones that really respect what you're doing, whether you're on foot or in ATV or even in a pickup truck. The same rules apply.
Yeah, it brings us right back to the beginning where we said everyone has different ethics, but treat the land as though you had worked for decades to raise enough money to buy it yourself. You know, public lands are owned by us. Treat it as though you respect it like it was yours and you want to care for it.
Right, exactly. And hence the old adage, it's just like ride hard, but tread lightly.
Exactly. Well, thanks for your expertise and your views and information about the different clubs. And like, you really did provide a lot of knowledge and insight into using ATVs in Alberta.
Yeah, and I would really encourage you to support your local club. Find out what's going on, and just go online and find out where your local club is. And a lot of these guys, you'd be surprised. You walk in and there's probably 4 or 5 guys you might know from your fishing game club or from your fly fishing club. And so, hook up with those guys and really get to that next level quickly.
Absolutely. And we'll put some websites up where people can get information. So thanks for coming out.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brad.
We hope to inspire people to reconnect with nature and appreciate where your food comes from by harvesting your own. For more information on getting started or to learn specifics about the Field to Fork experience, visit harvestyourown.ca and follow on Facebook and Instagram. Check back often for new material, recipes, and videos that are posted regularly. Please subscribe to Harvest Your Own podcast and take the time to rate and review the show to help us build a dedicated core of passionate hunters as our regular audience. Until next time, embrace the outdoors and all it has to offer. Thanks for joining us.